This is Soccer 101 with Moon and Rocchio.
Alrighty, welcome back to Soccer 101 with Moon and Rocchio. Hey, listen, it's been a little bit. Sorry for the lapse. I was in England, Germany, and Austria, and in France on a little business trip. Goldfinger had some shows. We had some shows over in the UK and over in Europe. My wife and I took a few days off in Paris. It rained the entire time other than the first show in Hatfield, just above London. Nothing, just before we got on air, Rocchio was like, did you get to have any sort of soccer experiences this time? Because he knows that I've toured stadiums and seen matches while I was over there. And I didn't think that I did, except for when I was backstage at Leeds. I had seen a bunch of friends, some guys in We the Kings, some guys in a band called You Me at Six, and all these bands are bands that I toured with way back in the day and used to play soccer with on tour and talk soccer like mad trash, because a couple of the guys that were with the You Me at Six dudes, they were diehard Arsenal fans, and a couple of the We the Kings guys were new into soccer, and they were big Manchester City fans. So they ran up to me backstage and were like, dude, did you see the final? Because it was that day when we were in Leeds. And it was Manchester City versus Manchester United in the FA Cup final at Wembley, where we had just left the day before. And I could tell in their faces that freaking Manchester City lost. And I was so stoked. I did not get to see the match. I still haven't seen it because I've been traveling this whole time. But man, Rocchio, I took the stage elated. And then I knew that we had a match, a St. Louis City match coming up against Miami. And I thought, you know what? I didn't get to talk to Rocchio about this, but I bet you it's going to go well. I felt good. I felt good. So we got a lot to talk about today. Sorry, I hijacked the intro.
We do have a lot to talk about. No, we got a lot to talk about because, first of all, we're happy to share you with the continent anytime. We're big soccer fans, and they are too over there. So we have a little paisano kind of moment. You didn't get to go to Italy, but that's fine. I'll forgive you for that one. You got to go to some other cool countries. So we're willing to share you for a little bit, Moon, but we got you back, and now we have some soccer to talk about. You talked about that Miami game. Man, you and I were going into that game with very different thought processes. We'll get into that a little bit, obviously a 3-3 draw, but I think we have to kick it off, though, with some unfortunate negativity, because before that 3-3 draw were losses 2 and 3 in a row for City. They lost 3-1 at Cincinnati. Obviously, the red card from Arcanic definitely hurts that game. Then you lose 2-1 with Seattle at home. Very disappointing loss. And then obviously you get the 3-3 draw. So before we get into the Miami game, obviously the most recent game, did you have any thoughts as City was kind of going through that 3-game losing streak?
This back line, man, has got to get it together. And I know a lot of people were like, no, it's not the back line, it's this, it's that. Marcanic has a lot of growth to do. When he first hit the scene, you and I were so excited. We saw so much potential. And I think everybody that watches him closely is like, wow, there's a lot of potential here. He just needs to really work on his soccer IQ. You know what I mean? Where to be.
Consistency would be another way to put it as well.
Yeah, but I think it honestly. I think it's a lot of youth. I see just kind of watching his behavior and the inconsistencies. I just think it's a lot of youth, and he just has some maturity to do. But there's some skill there, and he's not living up to his own potential, and that sucks. And it's costing our back line, which already is not living up to their potential. So honestly, I hate to say this, but when I was watching those, I was like, this is what we've been talking about. We're missing all the things that we've been talking about, which is why I actually was kind of excited about the Miami match, because the team let us down so much those 2 weeks there. And if you look at the patterns, when we're like the underdogs, when nobody expects anything from us, we do pretty well. We kind of outperform what the expectations are. And when the pressure's on to be as good as you're supposed to be, we fall apart. So against Cincinnati, we were supposed to be solid. We were supposed to kind of be back in the groove. We got some of our mojo back, maybe our talisman back, these things. And then it was just let down. So yeah, I was bummed. I'm bummed at the Marcanic thing. I know a lot of people are just kind of really on that guy right now.
Yeah, we'll get into that with the Miami game.
Yeah, but I think the back line has got to stand for something, and they're just not doing it right now.
Yeah, I agree. I do think, though, that when you look at the Seattle game and the Cincinnati game, because the Seattle game is, a talented team, different style, but still a talented team, and you outplay them the entire game. That was like Austin. It was like the Austin game or Dallas, which everyone was here and they had 30 shots and couldn't crack the net at all. It was another game where just you were controlling everything. And so to lose that one in the way it does, that was more frustrating than it was disappointing because they got so many chances, and that's just such a different kind of disappointment compared to the Cincinnati game because the defense played pretty well despite letting up those 2 goals. They had some big marks, but nonetheless, the offense just came out and was gangbusters in a way that we haven't seen in a while, and that had been a disappointing fact the previous week when you had two L's in just a couple of days. So the Seattle and the Cincinnati losses gave me such different feelings, but at the same time, the overarching point is that I wasn't feeling great about the defense, which is why I was fairly worried going into the Miami game. We didn't have a podcast before the game. If we would have, my prediction would have been 3-1 Miami. Obviously, looking back on it now, pretty pessimistic. But the reasoning is your exact point, which is the back line still gets exposed at times. And again, I am of the point, as I have been this entire season, that it's less them getting exposed because of a talent or maybe even an IQ problem, and more of just this team plays a very extreme style that constantly is going to expose the back line. There's a lot of long passes, there's very little consistent buildup, and they are playing a very high line and high press almost consistently. And so there's a lot of things that tax the back line, and we've talked a lot about with Marcanic on that left side about how they kind of just abdicate that space deep on the left side and say, well, we're going to beat you in other areas. We're going to win the ball in the tough areas in the middle, and we'll let you have the ball on the outside because we're not really worried about that. So that's why I wasn't very positive going into the Inter-Miami game. So let's now look forward to the Miami game. Obviously, you open up the scoring, and in fact, you lead 3 times. You give up the lead all 3 times. That's a very disappointing factor. In fact, Roman Berkey was extremely disappointed, especially on the goal where it was him one-on-one again with one of the team's best players. That's something that he's been mad about with Bouanga against L.A. He was mad about that with Jordan Morris against Seattle. He keeps harping on how 1v1s like that just shouldn't keep happening with the other team's best player, and lo and behold, it happens again against Inter Miami. My biggest takeaway here from the defense against Miami is that wasn't a great game for them. Obviously, you allow 3 goals. That's never going to be good. But the big thing for me is just how easily on those Miami goals they were able to be pulled out of position, and a guy just like they had drawn it up because they pull one person out of position, they pull a second person out of position, third guy runs in behind, and there's your goal. And it shouldn't be surprising. Third man attacks are one of the reasons that Barcelona became godly. And so it's not surprising that a team with 4 guys from Barcelona are breaking a third-man attack like that out consistently against the defense. Undoubtedly, the defense has to get better because you saw that against Miami, and I think you, of all people, would have been pulling your hair out when you saw how many third-man attacks they were pulling off and how easily it was to manipulate and puppet that City defense.
Super easy, man. The only consolation we have with this inconsistent and just like shapeless and personality-less defense is that that's how the league is for the most part. And Miami showed the same thing. Their defense was garbage as well. So, but here's where I was at least like optimistic going into the Miami. I was going to text you this. My prediction was going to be 2-2.
Okay. That's a good. But
I was on a train. Yeah, I was on a train in Germany, and my reasoning was I thought, okay, listen, if we can get an early goal, we're expected to be beaten here.
That's been a decider in a lot of City games. Early goals have been huge for them.
Yeah, I just thought like going into this, we're an underdog, and I mean, look at last season when we were an underdog. This team performs in a much more physical way, in a much more like confidently like aggressive way. And if you saw, there was so much more aggression, especially in the midfield, this match than we've seen pretty much this whole season. Like the aggression from last year, where Stroud and a couple of those other people were just kind of like, you know, going in, maybe catching more fouls than they should have, but like just kind of going in, bodying people in the midfield. paid off in goals. I think that's two of the three goals came from midfield turnovers where all we did was just get a little physical and then just present an opportunity. With Lowen back, we have some confidence, and thank goodness that guy is back. We have some confidence and ability in the park to look forward and feed balls. But all we got to do is just up the aggression game a little bit in the midfield to create more opportunities. And you get somebody like Durkin that takes a shot that I wasn't expecting him to shoot after that one or two touches. Great ball from Celio over the box, to the top of the 18. Durkin touches, turns and shot. Great goal. Now we're off to a running start. And Miami, honestly, shouldn't have even drawn that game. They shouldn't have drawn that game. We allowed, and I'm not even going to talk about the one-on-one with Berkey. If you watch, I'd say probably 3 to 5 different plays. When you're playing Inter Miami and you have the Busquets and Suarez and Messi out there, you know their weapons. We've been watching these guys for 20 years. You know what they do. You know where they go. And yes, they're better than you. But just because they're better than you doesn't mean that you shouldn't be playing with some real deliberate, and I mean deliberate, strategies in that backfield. And how they let Lionel Messi run around in a 10-yard area with nobody even looking at him. Rocchio, he wasn't challenged. He wasn't shadowed.
Okay,
he wasn't man-marked. He was not looked at. They didn't know where he was.
Did you notice a change in how they were defending him after that first goal? Because I don't think there was another time that whole game. Because that first goal that I'm talking about is when Parker gets pulled all the way from the middle, all the way out to the wide part. It gets brought back inside. Parker tries to play off Messi to a different man. He returns to his space. They play the ball back to Messi. He's got an easy shot. Goal Messi. We've seen it hundreds of times, specifically since Saturday night. So on that play, I don't think we saw Parker ever or any other defender get pulled out of positioning that badly on a hard man mark from Lionel Messi. Now, Bradley Carnell in postgame said that they didn't really change their plan. They kind of always had the same plan. But I didn't see them go with that kind of a heavy man mark. And what worked was what Carnell talked about in the postgame, which was guys coming from every angle, which is middies coming from behind and in front, wingers coming from left, right, and center to just harry the ball and like you said, be more physical. But I thought there was a definite change in how they were man-marking or just not man-marking, because I thought it was insane that you would actually run with Messi like that, because, again, he's just going to puppet you. He's going to bring you out, and he's going to put the ball where you're not anymore. That's his game. And so I was shocked when we saw Parker in that first goal get pulled away, and I think there was a definite change because I don't think we ever saw that specific tactic used to pull City apart. They obviously pulled City apart multiple times, but they never did it just with Messi carrying the ball and pulling a guy completely out of orbit.
They never did it with any world-class circus, magician sort of moves. So they did it with super basic stuff. And if you watch the players that are around on our back line, there were many moments where they weren't even looking at or for Messi. And listen, if whether it's a man-marking thing or somebody being pulled out of position or not, there needs to be so much communication back there. It's constant chirping. A good back line is constantly covering for each other in split-second decisions. Doesn't matter what your strategy is. And by the way, when you talk about like what their plan was, I have no idea what this team's back line's plan is.
I'm trying to discern something.
You're sitting here saying like, did they change their mentality? I'm not trying to slam them. I'm not trying to be that guy. I'm really not. I'm trying to say like, I don't know that they're together enough as individuals or as a unit back there to really know what the plan is. I'm sure they have a strategy. I'm sure the coaching is great and is telling them something. But if you just watch it, I just don't know how you let that happen. I don't know. Messi is the absolute master of turning his head constantly. He always knows where everyone is. That's his thing. He always knows where he needs to be and where everybody else is. And it seemed like we didn't have a single player, much less an entire unit of a backfield, paying attention to where everyone is, especially the most world-class player of all time. And he's right there. And Suarez is, like 6 steps slower than he ever has been. And like, I'm not saying that he's not still better and faster than all of our guys, but like, I don't know, man. I just think we blew a golden opportunity to shut down a team that shouldn't have had 3 goals. Like I really think that had the defense just done a basic job.
I'd argue they could have had 4.
What's that, Miami?
I'd argue that game could have been like 4-1 St. Louis early, and then Miami could have roared back and made it 4-4, especially in the last 10 minutes.
You have a world-class goalie. Berkey made some really great saves. And
you know what?
Berkey did his job.
To your point and to Berkey's point, he's talked a lot about how different does the game play if they are up 3-1 early. How like it's a completely different soccer game if you're up 3-1 at half as opposed to being tied 2-2 or up 2-1. And so that I might be overlooking that, but I mean they got so many chances late in that game. Obviously it was tied 3-3, but they got so many chances in those last 10 minutes. And Tata even talked about it in their post game. He was kind of mad that they got the draw because he thought they should have walked to a win in the last 10 minutes with a 4th goal. And I honestly I can't disagree with him very much.
Yeah, if you're watching the last 10 or 15 minutes, but if you watch the entire game, I would argue that St. Louis actually blew more chances than Miami did. So let's flip it around from the defense.
I'll take it.
Yeah, let's flip it around from the defense and say, okay, you just played one of the greatest fielded teams an MLS squad has ever put on the field with these particular names and skill sets. Okay, and you come away with 3-3, and if you saw the last 10 minutes, they should have beat us maybe, or should have had a few more in. Dude, we blew more chances than they did, and if I remember this right, we had 18 shots, they had 17. So we had more shots than they did. More blown opportunities. Yes, Berkey had to really pick it up, but that's why we have the greatest goalie in the league, is because we know that we're going to need him. So if we're going to play Kansas City Chiefs ball here and know that we're going to give up a lot of points, then as long as we're scoring more than the opponents, we're going to win. So okay, I'm putting this on the defense as I like to do because I'm a born defender.
I like where you're going here.
I'm a born defender, but let's finish some chances. Dinnerman screwed 2 chances that should have been goals by any pro out there, and he'd probably tell you the same thing. He blew 2 opportunities. They were probably each player out there had an opportunity that could have led to a goal-scoring opportunity that they kind of pussyfooted or blew in some way. So this was on the offense as much as it was on the defense, and they should have come away with a win. Yeah, Miami controlled the last 10, 15 minutes, but St. Louis City was the underdogs, and they finally showed some aggression. So it sucks that we didn't take 3 points because we should have, but I'm excited that at least this team has, I don't know, a little bit of spirit back.
Am I crazy that I care about shots and I care about quality of shots, but honestly I don't freak out too much about finishing because I just feel like if you get enough good shots, finishing eventually equalizes itself for the most part. And so
then why are we like 11th in the West?
Because
I'm not being facetious.
Because they're top 3 in shots and they're one of the worst finishing teams. Their XG is not as high as so they're like 3rd in shots, they're 10th in XG, and they're bottom 3rd in finishing. So that's what it tells you, which is they're getting a lot more shots. They're not the most quality shots, but they certainly should be finishing more than they should. City should have more goals. Is my point, especially when you look when you look at the shot total against Seattle, when you look at what the shots they missed against Miami, that's just a small sample of a larger 12-13 game season, or 15-16 games at this point, and they should have more goals than they have based on how many shots they're getting. They're still getting a lot of their shots, and they were doing that without Edward Lowen, and we're going to talk about him in a moment. What were you going to say there?
Well, didn't you just say that you're typically not as concerned with the finishing?
No, I'm just saying is as long as the team is getting a lot of shots and getting quality shots, my mindset is the numbers for finishing are going to regress towards the average, essentially.
No, I disagree because the margin for error is too small. It's too small in this game. And when okay, so we don't have a great back line, and clearly, we're not going to have a superstar as our center back. We're not looking for a Vidic or a Chianelli or somebody like that to come in and just boss the game.
They have 2 very good center backs. They just put them on islands. You're a defender. You just talked about that. How would you feel if the entire 90 minutes it's always just you against maybe 1 to 2 attackers, with rarely ever having a fullback to your left or a center back more than closer than 15 yards to your right? The center backs get constantly put on islands. that doesn't mean they're bad. They're just not. They're not world class, guys who are going to shut down every single person. But they are getting exposed by the scheme a little bit. Can we agree on that?
For sure, yeah. I'm not putting it all at their feet, but they've all made enough mistakes to take some of this.
That's
personally.
very true. That's very true.
And I'm not trying to slam them. What I'm saying is that's not our focus. That's not the team's focus. We have Berkey in there to pick up the slack there, hopefully. But it comes down to, dude. I played with plenty of players that were great players, and they could put the ball on goal, but there was something about where they would put it. It was, I don't know if it was just in their mind, in their training, and their whatever. They were so concerned about putting it on goal that these guys never scored because they always put it at the goalie. They always put it at a defender. They could not finish goals.
But we know Klaus can finish. He's just not at the same rate that he usually does. I'm saying this, like, Klaus's finishing will eventually get closer to what it has been over his larger career. And right now his finishing is a lot lower rate than it usually is, but it's going to climb back to the usual number. Klaus is not broken, is my point, I guess. And when we're going to talk about the new additions that are obviously not coming till July, but you're going to get more guys who know how to finish. And I think finishing is not the thing to worry about. Finishing is the thing to worry about, but it's something that you should be a lot more worried about if they weren't able actually getting the chances to finish, because eventually Klaus's numbers are going to return, I think.
I worry about finishing more than most things right now, mostly because here's why. Rocky, I'm looking in the standings right now in the West. We're 11th. We have 8 draws. 8 draws. I'm looking at all the draws in the West, and we have the most draws of anyone in the West. And you know what a draw is? That's one fewer finishes.
It's dropping points.
One fewer finish.
It's dropping points. Here's my thing. That's my thing. I hate the whole draw-loss thing. It's dropping points. That's how I like to think of them both. They're both dropping points. It's bad.
But as much as I complain about the defense, because I'm focused on that, and I know that I'm unfairly focused on that, I'm irrationally focused on that.
I want you to be rationally focused on the defense. Keep it up.
I'm talking to our audience like, forgive me, I understand how irrational I am. I totally do. But the reason that I'm way more concerned with finishing than Rockio is because that is the difference of last year winning the West and this year having more draws than anyone in the West and being 11th. It's too fine of a margin to miss finishes. Some of these giant leagues, the biggest and best leagues in Europe, the goal difference is what ends up being the defining difference in the end. That's one less or one more finish creates $1 billion in revenue lost or made. You know what I mean? Like, finishing is everything.
You're right. I'm being a little bit too much a stat nerd. You're right. I got to lock into the real world here. Let's lock into the real world. Let's talk about some positivities from that Inter Miami game, because it was a top team in the league that you did walk away with a point in an away match from. I'm just saying dropping points is bad, but again, That's a scenario is not the worst thing in the world. A top team away, 1 point, not the worst thing in the world. And the offense looked better. In fact, let's talk about the big parts of the offense that looked a lot better, and that was from the midfield. One of the big things is scoring 3 goals and having that kind of offensive production, Moon, when one of your best offensive players in Rasmus Alm, who's going to be out for 6 to 8 weeks with an MCL sprain, he gets knocked out, and then you bring in a rookie in Jose Kijima, and he absolutely balls out in a midfield full of absolute legends. And then, of course, you get the first start in return from Eduard Lowen, and no one should be shocked by this, but Lowen was dynamic. He was the best player in the field for St. Louis City. He was the best playmaker. He was the best chance creator. He was unbelievable, and he created a dynamism that this offense has clearly missed. Kijima and Lowen really blew my mind throughout that game, Moon.
Yeah, Lowen is definitely the talisman of the group.
Absolutely.
There's no question he has earned his right for the naysayers like myself to say, yeah, we're fans. I'm a fan. Now, one of the big reasons I'm a fan now, and I was so opposed to him, I wasn't opposed to him last year. I just was like demanding more than I should have. Is because we know what he is and what he isn't now, and they're using him to his full effect. And just as a spirited talisman, having him out there, you can see the team acts different. It's almost like they're more confident that something is going to happen without them because Lowen is in, and therefore they become a little bit more reckless, and I mean reckless in a good way. They become more aggressive. It's like the midfield gets a bit more aggressive just when Lowen is out there. So the fact that he's back,
stop thinking and they react.
Yes, they just start playing.
Yeah,
They
yeah,
start
they
playing.
just
They're
start
like,
playing.
"Oh, Dad's here. Now I don't have to stress out so much."
Yep. That's a great,
You know what I'm
it's a
saying?
great
Like,
way to
"Oh,
put
Dad's
it.
here.
It's a great
Dad's
way to
here.
put
We
it.
can't." You know what I mean? Like it's like a bunch of players like sneaked onto a field and they're afraid of getting in trouble, so they're trying not to play too loud or get anybody hurt. But now that Dad's here, we can't get kicked off the field. We'll just play fun ball, and it's wild to see. It's wild to see the difference when he's out there. You mentioned Kijima. He got his first MLS assist. He's great, man. Since he first came on the scene,
He was everywhere.
It's going to be fun. Yeah, it's going to be fun to watch a young player in Kijima grow and mature. He's quick. He's fun. Dude, we already mentioned that Durkin goal. Durkin was he the man of the match?
He was man of the match.
Okay.
I think
Yeah,
Leuven should have been, but obviously he doesn't have the goal tallies. I mean, you watch that match, and you can't tell me that the biggest difference maker. Every time City had a free kick or a corner, it was a potential to change the game.
Yeah, he was a big signing. Celio Pompeu earned his third assist of the season on that Durkin goal. He now has 3 goals and 3 assists this season. Vasilev scoring that second goal.
Celio also picked Messi's pocket for a steal twice in the game. I think that's honestly the biggest stat for him. You have to cut I guarantee you, he went to the video guy and was like, "I need 2 clips emailed to me immediately, please and thank you."
Yeah, and email it to the national team, Brazil
That too,
versus
yeah,
Argentina.
that too.
Vasilev scored his second goal of the season. That was fun. That was cool. He did that little step over on the right post there, and then popped in a goal. That was great. That goal was against his former club, Inter Miami, of course. And then Klaus recorded his second assist of the season. So a lot of good stats for everybody to get back on the board. Maybe get some confidence back, get some mojo flowing after those 2 losses before that Miami game.
Yeah, absolutely. And, we got a big game coming up this weekend. But before we get into this next weekend and talk a little bit about what's coming up, we got to talk about what's happened in the last 7 or 8 days, Moon, which is 2 big transfer news for St. Louis City SC. Last week, it was a name that we've already talked about on this show, but finally got confirmed. That was Cedric Tuechert, the Hanover 96 striker, confirmed that he will be signing with St. Louis City SC when his contract is up in Hanover, which means he'll be able to join the team on July 18th. And then on Monday, Jake Girdwood-Reich was confirmed a center midi / center back for coming out of Australia, was confirmed on Monday. He will also be joining City when the transfer window opens on July 18th. That'll be his earliest date available. So a new striker, a new center midi / center back, improving the spine of the City here. Your thought on the moves from Lutz and company preparing for the second half of the season?
Well, what do you know? They got a striker and somebody that they can kind of pop into a center back role. I know he's listed as a central midfielder, or kind of a central defensive mid. But I got a solid feeling they are looking for versatility, flexibility out of Girdwood-Reich to maybe be a center back, whether it's because we got some injuries or whatever. And I think these are both the right moves. I don't know anything about these guys really, except for their position. And this one kid, the Girdwood-Reich kid, has been through the Sydney FC organization since he was like 12 or 13 years old. So he's like a domestic product out of Australia that came up into Sydney FC for their second Australia Cup title. And their first since 2017. So they had this kid come up. He played all 5 games in 2023. He became a main fixture in this last season. Yeah, 23 matches that he was available for. He started or played in. He's in the under-20s for the Asia Federation, the U20 Asian Cup. At 19, he was called up for the under-23s for the West Asia Football Federation under-23 championship. Like, he's got good experience in international ball, in league ball. He's won a title now. And I think he's flexible, and those are the kind of players that they need. Somebody that they can have as a CDM or a center back. You've seen him interchange a lot of players in different positions and kind of see where people work in the scheme, in the grand scheme of things with St. Louis City SC, and I think that's a really, really intelligent signing, and I hope it pays off for our defensive woes.
There you go. And let's talk a little bit about these 2 names. I'll just throw out what we know about them. Quick shout out to Tom Franklin on Twitter. He found the exit interview that Girdwood-Reich did with Sydney FC just a couple days ago. One of the quotes that jumped out to me from this interview, he's talking about St. Louis City. He says, "I really like the way they play. It's a very demanding type of football, similar to here at Sydney FC, really. Also, the stadium, City Park, and their fans are incredible. They pack out that stadium every week. You just want to play in front of the fans, so that's really exciting as well." I like the attitude from Girdwood-Reich already. He says, "I'm excited to put myself in an uncomfortable position. I've always wanted to move overseas, give it a crack." I love that. Just excited for a new stage and going to a league that's just growing and growing. There's high-profile players there in the MLS, and I just can't wait to really test myself against very, very good players. Again, thanks to Tom Franklin for putting those out on Twitter from his exit interview with Sydney FC. I like the attitude from the kid, and I think he's a perfect fit. When you look at a guy who can play both in the midfield and center back, I like that for City because it's kind of what I was just joking about with you earlier, Moon. These center backs got to cover a lot of ground. So having a guy who's more comfortable in the midfield covering a little bit more ground, I think that's a good profile to have. When it comes to Tuechert, I know a lot of people are excited for him. Some things I've heard about people talking about this one, some people said, they need to get somebody who can fill the Niko Joachini role. Just looking at some of their numbers, he's not really Niko Joachini. He's really just an out-and-out, striker in a lot of ways. He doesn't have the defensive numbers that a guy like Klaus has, but I mean, progressive passing, progressive carries, goals, shooting. I mean, he's got all those numbers. He's a little bit of a different player than what they have in anybody right now. When you compare him to Klaus, you compare him to a Denerin. Again, you compare him to what they had last year as another striker in Niko Joachini. He's a little bit different than all those guys, but I really just think he's bringing a Klaus-like profile, except for the fact that his finishing numbers are a little bit better. In that he's a good passer, he's a solid dribbler, maybe not to the level of a Denerin, but I really think they are taking a guy like Klaus and they're trading out his work rate and his defensive capabilities we've seen from Klaus, and you're getting a little bit better of the finishing prospect. And that's exactly what we need. That's kind of seems like it would fit perfectly with Klaus. If you have Klaus in more of a false 9, maybe just a complete 10 role, which allows him to be a little bit further away from the goal, allows him to take advantage of being such a good passer and being such a good presser on the opposite side, it makes sense to have a more out-and-out striker who's just get forward, play the open man if he's there, but other than that, just finish every ball we put in there. One big thing when you look at a guy like Tuechert, a stat that I always look at that Klaus is really good at is how good they are at receiving progressive passes, which tells me positioning and things like that, being able to find the hole in the back line and get forward and receive that progressive pass from your midfielders. Tuechert great at that. I really think this is going to be a great fit for City, if not the one that everyone's wanted. I think this is really going to open up the attack when he gets here in July.
I hope so, man. If we have an out-and-out, just like selfish, ridiculous, egotistical maniac.
He's not egotistical, though, because he passes a lot. There's a lot of passing numbers.
I want a guy. I want a guy who's just massively. I want a crazy person, number 9. You know why? Because I think you're right. If Klaus was in a number 10 and he was allowed to just be not have all the pressure on his shoulders, be a little bit more creative, and we had a Leuven. Like, just imagine this straight 3, right? A Leuven, Klaus, and then just some selfish, crazy number 9 that only cares about goal. Oh, we would dominate.
I agree, but here's my thought process on and why I love the idea of a striker who's willing to pass. And I know you're joking, but I'm being serious, because if we had a more clinical striker, do they score 4 or 5 goals against Miami? Yes, I will admit that. No doubt about that. But at the same time, if you break down the shots and the chances they were getting against Miami, if they had a striker who was more willing to pass, who was more willing to send that killer pass in the box, that extra pass, they also would have scored 4 or 5 goals, because Sam Denerin missed a wide-open extra pass opportunity. I don't think it was Klaus. It was another player earlier in the first half who also missed a very clear, just pass it across the face of the goalie, and there's a wide-open goal. And so there's also an aspect of clinical passing from your last man that City, I think, has missed at times this year. They've missed that extra pass for the easier goal. And if they just have that, they also score more against Miami. So while I agree with you, I'd love an egotistical striker, the fact that Tuechert is a great striker and he's willing to make that extra pass, that extra final pass, I love that as well.
Here's the one thing, though, man. You wouldn't be talking about how they didn't do some extra pass if they had finished.
But you wouldn't be talking about the finishing if they had scored 5 goals, would you?
I'm just saying we need a crazy person.
You're right.
I want a psychopath. I want a crazy person.
I think Moon is getting this. You want a psychopath at every level. You want a psychopath in defense, in midfield, and at forward. You want like one in each level.
Can we have 2 psychopaths? That's all. I'll be fine with 2. Just a number 9 and a freaking number 5. I need just a boss center back psychopath. I need a scary human being. I need a Nemanja Vidic in the back, and we can give up 3-4 goals a game. I don't care, because if we get some psychopath number 9 and Klaus and a dinner around our tot, and everybody's like feeding those pretty balls in like you're talking about. It'll be great. I think everybody will, and just start to finish, man. Can we just finish? Everything's gonna be fine.
Yep, it's going to get a little bit trickier until July 18th because the reinforcements are a few months away, and there have been some injuries. Of course, Tomas Ostrak is out for the season with ankle surgery. That was a rough injury. Right after that happened, you get Leuven back, but then, of course, as soon as Leuven gets his first start, now Rasmus Alm again, as we said earlier in the episode, Rasmus Alm is going to be out 6 to 8 weeks with an MCL sprain, so he'll be out until late July with the League's Cup break. So they need somebody to step up. Obviously, Kijima in midfield was big. Getting Leuven back's big. Indy Vasilev, Celio Pompeu. AZ Jackson not involved with the team over the weekend. That's a little bit concerning. He struggled. Maybe they kind of took him away to kind of give him a chance to breathe. But they need those reinforcements in July because right now they've lost 2 of their best players this season in the midfield and the wing in Ostrak and Alm. And it's going to be interesting to see if they can compensate this weekend against Portland.
I think that's where they're looking for this Jake Girdwood-Reich kid. I think if they have these injuries in the midfield, he can be up there. But he's a big boxy kid. He's like 6'1",
yeah.
and he's kind of boxed out. He's got big shoulders.
Maybe here's the thing, Moon. Don't hold your breath for it. But maybe you get Girdwood-Reich for instead of the center back depth, which I think is very important. But you have him now as another center midi. You can start him and either Blom or Durkin. Now you go with a double pivot, and now maybe people finally get what they really wanted all last year and they wouldn't shut up about. Edward Leuven playing up as a proper number 10. Oh baby. You guys can finally get it, you weirdos.
That'd be interesting.
It would work. I think it would be fairly successful. A lot of people have been clamoring for more of a midfield 3 than what they have seen. I think that could work. But again, that's all the way off in July. Jose Kijima could be in a completely different spot for this team. A lot of things happen between now and July. And I'm with you, Moon. I think we're just probably going to be having to keep banging the finishing drum probably for the next month or 2.
You talking about doing like a 3-4-3? Wouldn't that be sick if we had somebody? If we had confidence in our backfield, we could have a 3-4-3.
People are all about that odd. Man, the 2 things that just keep getting talked about by City fans that never happen and are odd man back lines and a proper number 10. And my thing is I'm good with the odd man back line because I've been saying that Markanic's a wing back more than a fullback this entire time. I think Totland is a definitional, marauding right wing back. I think it'd be perfect. But you do need a little bit more center back depth because this season you've been thin there because of injuries the entire time. So maybe in July that becomes more of a thing when you get Girdwood-Reich, who maybe seems like a perfect maybe kind of stopper in the middle of your back 3. I think Durkin could also play that role, but again, you don't have that depth yet in center midi for Durkin to step back and play a full game as a stopper in a back 3. So you need to get that depth before that works. I love the idea. I just don't know if they're really going to move from this kind of 4-2, this 4-2-2, 4-2-3-1 hybrid that they've been running the majority of the season until everything maybe changes when Tuechert and Girdwood-Reich get here. By the way, one other thing before we go, Moon, because we didn't talk about it earlier. We mentioned Markanic's struggles. I do want to point out he did get caught, I think, for the 3rd time this season, letting an attacker stay onside, and that ended up being a very big goal against St. Louis City SC.
That was him? That was his foot?
That was Markanic, again, his foot. I think that's the 3rd time. And, to your point, positioning – IQ on the field, that's been one of the things that's bitten him. And I'm not trying to harp. It's just that we mentioned him earlier, and we didn't mention that one part of the Miami game because I've been a big Markanic fan, and I think the thing I've been talking about all this episode as well, which is what this team does well, or what this team tries to do, they do well. And I think Marcanic falls under that umbrella, which is what they ask him to do, he does well. But he lets those mistakes happen. He gets the red card earlier in the week. He gets put back in the starting lineup, and then he gets caught again with his foot back to keep a guy on sides. It's not great. It's not the development you're looking from a guy who made such a big impact right out of the gate, mid-season last year.
Yeah, costly stuff. The little stuff matters. It adds up, and so do the finishes. Well, what do we got coming up?
We got Portland Timbers coming up this weekend, Moon. They are 5-5-7 on the season. They are 17th in Major League Soccer. They are 2-5 away. They've pulled just 8 points in away games so far this year, and they have a 0 goal differential, 32 goals for, 32 goals against. I think this has got to be a W. This has got to be 3 points for a home match for St. Louis City. You just tied one of the best teams in the league. You're coming off before that 3 straight L's. Again, it's a home match. You can't be dropping points anymore. You were just talking about how many draws it is. A draw's not good enough. A loss certainly isn't good enough. They got to walk away with 3 this weekend.
Yeah, we have 2 games in hand compared to Portland, and if we win this, we'll be tied with them. There's no reason we shouldn't beat this team.
Yeah.
If we lose, I think this is the point of the season where if we lose to a team like this, we really start to
That's fair.
worry.
That's fair.
Not panic, but worry. And I don't like worrying, man. Like
It's much less fun.
what man has added an hour to his life by worrying? You know what I'm saying?
You're
So
right about
please,
that.
St. Louis City SC, don't do this to me, man.
Don't do it.
Don't
Joe.
do this.
I will say, I am going to ask people out there to add to some stress to me, because we're not going to talk about it this episode, Moon. We're going to wrap up right here. But next episode, I want to dive into a narrative I'm hearing from some St. Louis City fans, I should say, which is last week, maybe it was 2 weeks ago at this point, a graphic came out that listed the total salary that the rosters are costing each MLS team, and City was at the bottom of it. And that has caused a rash of claims alongside 3 losses and a draw that the reason City's struggling this year is because the team's cheap and poorly built. If you believe that, please let us know. You can message me on X at Rocc ESPN, ROCC ESPN. Please let me know your thoughts on this, because I want to break down this whole narrative, because I'm not a fan of it, Moon, and we're going to get into some numbers next week, because we're going to have to talk some hard dollars and cents here, and maybe smash some sense into people around the St. Louis area. So let me know if you have a problem with it, because I want to hear your issues, and I want to take some questions. I want to go through some people's questions, because we got some things to dive into.
Yeah, I'm curious. I'm curious as to what the fans think, what everybody thinks. It's good to be back with you, Rockio.
Absolutely,
it's good to be back,
Moon.
man.
Absolutely. I mean, I've missed Soccer 101. I've missed everyone. I've especially missed you, sir.
Oh, thanks, brother. Hey, make sure you subscribe to the podcast. Share it with other fans. It is a St. Louis City SC podcast, but we talk about as much as we can across the league, and that we think might be interesting to listeners. Rockio, I love you, buddy. It's good to be home.
Good to have you back
let's not have it.
stateside.
Yeah, let's not have it rain too much. I hope we get a solid 3-1 or 3-0 win over Portland this weekend. Don't forget, City 2 will take on Tacoma on June 6th at 9 p.m. Central at the Starfire Sports Complex up in Tacoma. So everybody is out in the Pacific Northwest, and it's going to be awesome. Rocky, I think that's it. You got anything else?
No, sir. Let's see a City win this weekend, and maybe just some go.